Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy folks, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast with me, your host, Luke. Hope you're doing well, hope you're all good. First of all, I want to apologise. I know it's been a bit of a hot minute since I did an episode. That's mainly because I don't know if anybody's ever heard, and it ties in quite nicely with the topic today. Not ironically, I didn't plan it to, but it just seems to coincide so well. But you might have seen in the news that there's been a heat wave in the UK where I live. Highs of 40 degrees, which for a lot of other people in a lot of other countries is normal, but in the UK it's completely not normal at all. Frankly, it was dangerous, and I don't want to get into politics of it, but basically we were one away from a national emergency, because obviously we have no infrastructure for that weather, or that type of heat. So because of that, it was just too hot to record, and I was just too tired to watch anything or do anything. I just wanted to keep cool as much as possible and just exist, you know. So that's why, there hasn't been a lot of sort of activity from me if you follow me on Twitter, or even why this one's coming out a bit later than it would normally. If you listen to this in the future, then don't worry about this unless climate change is really taking effect really badly. Then please heed my warning. But if you listen to this like the week it's released, I do apologise. But I can't control the weather, sadly, and the heat was just too bad to record. But it's cooling down now. Looking out my window right now, it's lovely and grey, and it rained a bit earlier, and it's lovely and cool. So it's typical normal English weather. We moan about it, but like when we have extreme heat, it's kind of like you miss it. It's kind of like an old friend. So it feels quite nice to look out the window and just see grey. It's a very boring colour, but when you live in the UK, you just get used to it. Anyway, enough about that. I just wanted to apologise for why I haven't been on in a while. But now we'll get into it. Get back into the flow. Get back into the flow of the episode. So before I begin, I want to get down to some of the busyness of the podcast. So if you've been listening to the older episodes, this episode and this show is sponsored by the lovely people at World of Books. If you use the code NERDY, that's NERDY, NERDY 10, NERDY 10, all higher case. If you use that when you go to the checkout, you get a whopping 10% off anything and everything that you buy from them. They do books, they do video games, from PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4, Xbox original, Xbox 360, Xbox One, DS, all sort of video game devices. They do vinyl. I think I mentioned books as well. They do cassettes. Basically, anything and everything that they have in their store, whatever takes your fancy. When you get to checkout, type in my code, that's NERDY10, all higher case, and that gives you a whopping 10% discount. So I just want to say thank you to the folks at World of Books. I love you all. That, by the way, that code is valid till the end of the year. So you have until now, till the end of 2022 to use it. So yeah, you've got months. Got quite a bit of time to get used to it, and you can use it as many times as you want, so go crazy. But yeah, so I just want to say thank you to the people, the folks down at World of Books for sponsoring this episode and sponsoring the show. I love you all. So today's episode is another Blue Sky episode. So about 2 weeks ago, just to give it people who are new, who are watching just this episode and didn't watch the episode I did 2 weeks ago, I decided to do a look back on the studio Blue Sky. Now, for anybody who doesn't know Blue Sky Studios, they made Ice Age, they made Robots, they did the Rio movies, they did Ferdinand, Spies in Disguise, they did Horton Hears a Who. They did quite a bit. They were working with 20th Century Fox. They were owned by them for quite a long time, really. I think from the early beginning of the 2000s. And then Disney bought Fox, and within the merger of that, Xbox Place, get myself confused now. Disney basically shut down Blue Sky Studios. My theory for them doing that is the fact that they already have their own sort of animated studio, as well as they already have Pixar. They don't really need another one. That's basically me rephrasing basically their statement. If you want to know their statement, by all means, go back to my original episode that I did 2 weeks ago, and then you could hear about it there. But basically, that's what happened. They shut the studio down, and Blue Sky Studios, they basically this year, a couple of months ago, released their final sort of short, and it was just a short sort of video of Scrat, their mascot, their little mouse squirrel thing from Ice Age, finally manages to get his nut, eats it, and then sort of leaves, and that's kind of a nice farewell. Kind of like Blue Sky Studios can goes out in their own terms, apart from just being shut down, and that's it. So I thought when I watched that, I want to do them a bit of justice. They were a big sort of cornerstone of my childhood growing up because I'm a big fan of animation, and I love to watch their films. And it's a shame they're gone, and nobody really talks about them or their movies that much, really. So I figured, what, I'll do a look back, and every few weeks or so, I'll watch one of their films, and I'll just talk about it and how I feel, and the nostalgia behind it, and kind of just bring a bit of remembrance about how good they were as a studio. It's a shame that they're gone. So that's just a reintroduction of this topic, of this sort of don't know what you'd call it really, this series that I'm doing. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode, by all means go back, check it out. It's only like 2 episodes behind. Behind it's right. Alien, you'll have Alien, Clone and Marines, and then you lower it down, and then you have the episode there to check it out. So by all means, if you haven't, please do. It's a good episode. It's a lot more in depth and gives you a lot more detail in the situation that unfolded than the sort of reintroduction I just gave there. So there's that. So today's topic, today's movie is Ice Age. So I wanted to talk about just talk about how good of a movie it is, really. So here's some Ice Age facts for you. So the film was released on the 22nd of March 2002. I was only 4 when this movie came out. I'm still a young bean, but I was a tiny, tiny little, tiny runner bean. I was a very small. What I'm trying to think. What's the smallest bean in the world? Is it like a what's it called now? Uh it's like it's like a baked bean without any sauce, but it's smaller. I don't know. Tiny little bean. Anyway, I was small when this movie came out. Originally, it was intended to be a 2D film, but through production, they basically decided that it would be better off it's a 3D animated movie. I would have actually liked to see how this film did in 2D. I am a stickler. I really, really enjoy, mainly because I grew up with them, but I really, really enjoy and miss 2D animation, especially hand drawn animation. You could tell that, that the backgrounds were all sort of hand painted, hand drawn, and then the sort of animated characters, kind of like if you imagine, say, the Jungle Book, you've got the background which is all jungle and forest and absolutely gorgeous, and then you have Mowgli walking around, and you can kind of tell that his animation and his sort of character has been superimposed onto that sort of art, but it's done in such a way that it's seamless that unless you're really looking carefully, you can't tell. And I miss that because, granted, it took a long time to make those sort of movies because you had to kind of draw every single sort. It was basically stop motion. You had to draw one motion, and then you had to draw the character again, this time slightly bent over a bit more, then bent over a bit more, then eventually it would look like the character sort of seamlessly sort of bending up and down or moving their arms and walking. Granted, it took longer, but I just kind of miss it. The old sort of the old heart, the old soul in me is kind of like I miss the 2D. So I would have liked to see this movie done in a 2D fashion. But it works out in 3D animation. I understand, like I said, it took longer and it was easier and cheaper to do 3D animation, and because you could do it quicker, you could get the movie out quicker, which means that you could recoup your money a lot quicker than you would of all the money you spend doing 2D. It's how it works. If the business, the there's always what's the word I'm looking for? There's always that transition in business. When the new thing comes in, if it's quicker and easier and cheaper, you you bet your bottom dollar that businesses are going to follow that route, then keep the old traditional way, which is a shame. But at the same stage, I understand what they do. I just miss 2D animation. Maybe one day I'll do a whole episode on 2D animation. It'd be fun to have a look into the history of it. I think it's interesting anyway. Nobody else has to listen to it. I'll just find it fascinating. Anyway, so next fact: it was made for $59 million and made $382.2 million at the box office, which doesn't sound like a lot, but back in early 2000s, for an animated movie to make that much money was just incredible. Nowadays, if an animated movie made that much money, it would still be considered as like that's a lot of money. But if now, because so many animated films have joined the $1 billion club, and as so many animated movies now make $750, $1 million sort of movies. That anything under the 5 million is considered a flop or considered a fail. Not really by fans, but by studios. Like if it doesn't make a certain amount, if they don't project it to make a certain amount at the box office overall, the movie is considered a flop. It's all about statistics and all that, and money, and like how much we put into it and how much we get out of it. Back in those days, $382.2 million was a lot of money for any movie to make, let alone an animated movie. It was really, really good for an animated movie to make that much money, especially a 3D animated one. But nowadays, it's just funny to look about how films nowadays, if they made that much money nowadays, it would be considered a flop. Considered that a movie that didn't do very well, which again, I think is completely silly. But again, it's all about the business. It's all about the money. It's not about people enjoyed it or if it was good. It was just how much money did it make, and that's just how it is. That's just how the business is. It's sad, but again, that's just how it goes. The film's development team took several trips to the Natural History Museum to make sure that the movie felt authentic to the Ice Age. So all the characters looked the way they should, acted the way they should. They spoke to scientists as well to see that the characters moved the way they should. Like how would this character move? How would it act? So on and so forth. So I really like that. It just shows that that this team, Blue Sky Studios, at the beginning of their first ever sort of huge motion picture film, didn't just sort of wing it, be like, we have an idea, let's just go for it. It was the fact of this is our first sort of big break, we want to do it properly. So they went off and they did their research. I even like this little detail that I found that really, really made me smile. So they would not just sort of study the animals and sort of talk to scientists to realize how they sort of moved, but also I really liked it. Some of the 3D animators would visit parks to watch squirrels to kind of see the twitchy movements that squirrels made to kind of understand how best to animate Scrat. And I just like that. It's a silly little thing. You just imagine a bunch of animators sitting in a park, just be like, oh, look, there's a squirrel, and just kind of watching squirrels bury their nuts and see how they move and the quick movements they make with their heads and how they twitch all the time and how they're moving their tails. Because anybody who's not really an animal person wouldn't really know this. I'm a big animal person, and one of my favorite animals are squirrels. I love squirrels. I know how weird that sounds, but sure, I just love squirrels. But one thing that I love about squirrels, and this is a fact, a bit of trivia for you, bit of a side quest even, but squirrels, when they shake their tail, that's to let other squirrels know and sort of pray that they can see them. So it's a two-way sort of conversation. Basically, say for example, a squirrel's on a fence and a cat's coming towards it, it will start to shake its tail, and that's to let sort of the cat or whatever know, I can see you. I know that you're there. But at the same stage, any squirrel in the area that's also watching, that can see that squirrel, to let them know there's a predator not nearby. Stay high, get out of the way, run for it. And I think that's kind of cool. It's a cool little sort of thing. we like to think of ourselves as intelligent, and want to think that animals, that there's no real sort of hierarchy, or there's no structure. But actually, when you look into a lot of animals, you can actually see they're a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for. And squirrels, same thing. We like to think that they're not really intelligent, but they incredibly are. They talk to each other with movements, and I think that's kind of cool. But there's a bit of trivia for you. Whenever you see a squirrel shake their tail, it's basically letting you or any other predator know that they see you and that there's a threat, and that they know any other squirrel in the area knows like there's a threat, sort of back away. So that's a bit of trivia for you there. But I like that idea. This the fact of some animators going to a park and just watch squirrels. I just think that's really wholesome, really lovely. What else? What else? What else? It was nominated for Best Picture Animation Awards, but lost. I think it lost to. I wish I wrote this down. It wasn't. Was it Monsters Inc? Yeah, I think it was months. No, no, no. It was. They lost to Spirited Away, Studio Gimli, um, film. That's who they lost to. They were in the running. I think Monsters Inc. was in the running with them as well, because I think Monsters Inc. was 2001, 2002. So I wish I wrote it down, but if I remember correctly, I think it was the Studio Ghibli movie Spirited Away that won the award. But they were nominated, and to be honest, just to be nominated is enough, especially for like your first animated movie, to not just make a lot of money at the box office, but also be nominated. Yes, it would have been nice to win, but just to be nominated must have felt great. No, because if I was on the animated team, it showed and told me that we did something right, and that we're on the right path, and that if we follow this path, we're going to succeed and we're going to do quite well. So I think that's quite nice that they were nominated. Shame they didn't win, but still quite nice. Also, the so that's the okay. So that's the fact part about it. Now I want to mention the cast. Now we all know the cast are, but I just thought I'd mention some of the cast of this movie. You'd be quite surprised who was in this film. I know I was. So the cast are, so you got John Leguizamo. I feel like I'm butchering your last name. I'm so sorry, John Leguizamo. Fantastic actor. But he plays Sid. Then you got Ray Romano plays Manfred or Manu. You got Dennis Leary as Diego. Jack Black was in this. He played Zeke, which was one of the sort of saber-toothed tigers, the little skittish one. Plays him. You got Alec Alan Tudnik. I'm sorry, Alan. Not that you're ever going to listen to this, but I butchered your last name. But that guy, he played Hey. He's in a lot of animated movies, and he's not always using his voice. He's always sort of making just noises. So, like in Moana, he just makes the chicken noises. But in this, he plays one of the dodos. I think he does the voices for all the dodos. And that's it for like the sort of the main cast. I thought the ones that sort of surprised me. The biggest one that surprised me was actually Jack Black. I didn't think he was in this, but then actually rewatching it today, I was actually quite surprised. But that's sort of the cast of the main cast. Obviously, once we break out in towards sort of Ice Age 2 and Ice Age 3, sort of the cast sort of gets monumentally bigger. But like I said, early days, first ever sort of animated movie. They've only got a small budget, can't go out and sort of spend loads of money on high octane sort of talent. Gotta keep it small, gotta keep it low. That way we can sort of save as much money as possible and actually spend it on the animation, and then just sort of sort of get well-known actors but not expensive actors in the role. That's again, that wasn't written anywhere. That's just against my theory of how it would work. Because again, if you've only getting a small budget of like 59 million, which is a lot of money, but in terms of animation and especially computer animation, when it was still a relatively new sort of thing, it was a big investment for any sort of company or any sort of studio. That you want to kind of keep the cost down in terms of talent. That way you can spend as much as possible on, the mainstay on the actual animation itself. So that's everything. So that's sort of the facts. That is the cast. I'm going to do a quick sort of review now. But before that, I want to take a break. Take a breather. Take a relax. I've been talking for 18 minutes and 54 now seconds. But we'll come back and be refreshed. The review ain't going to be very long. The review is going to be a bit of a short one because it's not a play-by-play, just thoughts and feelings. That's why this section was so long, mainly because I figured there's not a lot to say when it comes to review, and I don't really like doing small reviews. I like to make my reviews somewhat longish, not sort of like just because I like to waffle, but mainly just because I feel like I like to give you more money, like bang for your buck. You know what I mean? Even though this is technically free, I just like to kind of give you more than just be like, oh yeah, it was good. That's it. Thank you for listening. You know what I mean? Like, want to give you some enjoyment. Longevity. So I'm going to have a bit of a break, have some high quality H2O, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, relax, go right, end it, stop. I need to stop talking. All right, let's go. And we're back. I am sorry about how I ended that there. After doing this for so many months now, I still haven't like narrowed down how best to end, like not just a segment but end the podcast completely. Like I keep trying to reinvent it and change it. I'm just really bad at closing. Like I can talk for England, as anybody who's listened to this show knows, um, but when it comes to actually stop talking and ending it right or correctly or whatever you want to say, I always struggle. So I do apologize for wherever that was there. Maybe in the edit I can edit it down. Probably knowing me, probably not. But it is what it is. But yeah, so back to basics, back to business. So the point of this segment is the review is the main part of the actual main bulk of the episode. So my thoughts and feelings of the movie. Well, in all honesty, I love this film. Like I said, I was 4 years old when it came out. I was only a young bean, and I remember watching this film for the first time and just sort of falling in love. Like I said, from a young age, I've always been a lover of animated movies. I've always had an enjoyment for them. I've had like VCRs, videotapes of like old movies, like old Disney movies, Peter Pan, Black Cauldron, um, Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, Lion King, you name it. My parents, they collected so many of the sort of video tapes of the Disney movies, and obviously I had some of the Pixar films. Obviously at the time it was only really sort of all you had at the time when I was about 4 was just Toy Story and Toy Story 2, and obviously I think Monsters Inc was on the way, or if it was out by this time I can't remember. So you didn't have much in the way of Pixar, but there was a lot out there, and then you had All Dogs Go to Heaven, you had Cats Can't Dance, The Quest of Camelot. These were by other studios as well. I think The Quest of Camelot was, I think, either Universal or Warner Brothers. But you had Space Jam, and I know that's sort of live action mixed with 2D. But the point is I'm trying to make is the fact of growing up, I was surrounded by sort of animation, whether it be from a cartoon or from a movie, and it would all be 2D. And I think that's where my love of the sort of the 2D animation comes from, is because I've got so much member berries from that time and from watching those films and putting in the tape and rewinding the tape all the way to the beginning, and then just sort of that the memories of just having a videotape. And I mean, whenever I go to a car boot now and I hold a videotape in my hands, straight away it just brings back member berries, and it's such a lovely feeling. So um, this film holds a lot of sort of love in my heart, really, for the nostalgia sake of it. um, it's kind of funny when it's not just with this film, but it's kind of funny going back and watching animated movies from my childhood and just real noticing all the story beats that I didn't notice before, all the adult jokes and all sort of the grown up humor and all that in the films, because you can tell that these movies were made for kids, but the animators themselves are adults, and they know that adults are going to be watching these films with their kids. So to make the movies enjoy to bring the enjoyment for those films for the adults, they add in sort of the double entendre, the sort of play word play and sort of innuendo, stuff like that, and that way they can sort of the adults can enjoy it as well. And the same happened here. Well, I rewatched it not even an hour ago, really. I put on Disney Plus, I stuck it on, and I rewatched it, and I fell in love all over again. Honestly, this film is great. All the characters do a fantastic job. All the voice actors, should I say, do a fantastic job. Sid is hilarious. The banter that Sid has with Manny, the banter that Sid has with Diego. I like Ice Age 2 and I like Ice Age 3. And I've seen the others afterwards. We'll get on to the others as we get closer towards them. I don't really want to get into them right now. But I'm an old school sort of guy. I think some of the best things come in threes. The first three Pirates of the Caribbean movies were great, fantastic, loved them. After that, they were a bit meh. Same with the Transformers movies. The first three Transformers movies were great, and then they went down the toilet. You know what I mean? And I could be here all day talking about somehow, like not all. Sometimes you go past three and like the Harry Potter films, and they got better as they went on. And then some sort of films, kind of like the Transformers movies after the first three, kind of went a bit magoo. But I'm not here to talk about that. But I just want to say, like, I do like the first three sort of Ice Age movies, and after there they go a bit sort of magoo as well. But again, we'll get onto that when we sort of get there. But the reason I bring that up is because when you watch the first Ice Age, it is just Sid, Diego, and Manny, or Manfred. And I like that sort of dynamic duo. I like them just being them together. And one of the things that I didn't much like about Ice Age 2, which I won't get into it now, I'll wait until I get around to watching it. But one of the things I didn't like about Ice Age 2 was the fact that they introduced more characters to this sort of pack to the herd. And I didn't like it so much, as growing up. I remember watching it growing up, like, I don't like it. I prefer my little group, because obviously you have to remember, Ice Age 2 didn't come out till I think 2007. I think it was about 2006, 2007. This came out 2002. So for a long time, it was just rewatching Ice Age over and over again. So when Ice Age 2 came out, it was like, no, I don't like this. I wasn't a fan. So to say that I have a love and I kind of really sort of care about just this trio, this group of three of people, animals, creatures, whatever you want to call it, I they hold a special place in my heart. We rewatching this movie over and over again. When I mentioned it in the last episode that I did, and I briefly mentioned Ice Age, sitting with my family, having a Chinese, having a takeaway, because this is one of their movies in the UK that always gets played every summer. Every summer, you'd think Christmas, but it's not. Generally, every summer, 6 weeks holiday when the kids are off school, and the TV stations, they all try to put movies on for kids during the day. It'll all be animated movies, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Film 4, all that. They'll always sort of put sort of these movies on, and I bet you any money every single year, and it was growing up, and I don't know if it is any now. It wouldn't surprise me if it still is, but every year ITV2 will always have Ice Age on. If it's not on once a week, it's on at least twice, you know. And I remember rewatching that movie over and over again on TV, rewatching it over and over again on DVD. And now we're streaming. I'm probably won't watch it as much now because I'm an adult. But if I ever have kids, it will be a film that I introduce to them because it's just fun. It's an adventure sort of film. There's no people. It's just animals. It's great. It's fantastic. And maybe I've got the rose tinted glasses. Maybe it's the member berries. Maybe this movie is not great as I remember it. And maybe me just watching it fit with the sort of rose tinted glasses on, I'm seeing it in sort of a positive light. But to me, it's just a great movie and I enjoy it. But I'm not just here to kind of gloat, and I'm not just here to kind of talk about, oh, I loved it, it was great, and blah, 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 blah. This kind of the whole point of this series is to kind of watch their evolution. And from looking at what comes next, because the next movie that they do is Robots, and after that, I think it's Ice Age 2, and then so on and so forth. Watching their sort of where they began in Bunny, which is the sort of short film that I watched and reviewed in the last episode. Looking at what they did there, not just their art style, but also their storytelling, and then you look at Ice Age, you can tell that they really knew what they were doing in terms of story. They had their own art style that you could tell when you saw one of their films that it was made by them. I think the only sort of film that I would say you could tell that you could kind of get a bit confused would be Robots, and that's only because obviously Robots being a lot more technical, being more robotic, i.e., sort of, ironically, the title and the characters. Because for a long time I thought that movie was made by DreamWorks, and when I found out it was made by Blue Sky, I was blown away. It's like a revelation. I was like, oh my god, I don't believe it. But a lot of their films, kind of follow the same sort of style, and you can tell that their sort of animation style, and obviously as technology got better, it got more refined, and it was just, but it always sort of stayed the same. You can tell they always had this style. Had a way of sort of not just sort of telling a story, both sort of physically and from what you hear and what you see, but also like visually. You could tell this was a Blue Skies movie. You could tell that it was a film that they put a lot of effort into it, that this was their first ever movie. They wanted it to succeed, so they pulled out all the stops. The story is heartfelt, the story is funny, the story is silly, you know the visuals are great, but it mixes between the sort of ice age sort of age of sort of no technology, but also have modern sort of parts to it. They had a moment where you have a I don't know what it's called, like a mini volcano thing that spurts up like a red flame, and they stop, and they let a iceberg go past, and then the iceberg goes past, and then a green flame comes up, and then they keep moving, kind of like a stop sign, like a oh, I'm blanking on the name now. What it's called? All my life I've seen them, I've mentioned them, but now I'm talking about them, I can't remember the word. Traffic lights. That's it. For some reason, I was blanking on a traffic light. Something you should never do, especially if you're driving. More so if you're walking. Never blank on a traffic light, because that's how you die. But I take myself. Don't take me seriously, people. I laugh at my own jokes. Okay. Um, but that being said, moving on to being more serious. Like again, it's taking a modern sort of thing that we know and putting it in an ice age sort of setting, and it just works, even though it makes no sense when you take it out of context, obviously. But at the same stage, this is an anime program for kids. It's not meant to be taken seriously, but it's one of them things. It's just it's silly and it's funny. They do the whole evolution thing. Like Sid, they go into a cave, and they do the whole sort of the evolution of how you get to Sid the Sloth. And then you see it at the end, and then you got Sid there standing, and he's like the end of the evolution. That's as far as it goes. It stops at him, you know. And they show you the aliens, and the aliens is like, because even though again I wasn't a big fan of it, I think it was Ice Age 5, which Scrat goes back and somehow finds the alien spaceship from the first one and gets in it and kind of destroys the planet somehow, or kind of. I can't really remember the film, if I'm being honest. I've blocked out most of it. Again, by that stage, it got a bit silly. But even that they show dinosaurs as well, which is a sort of a throwback to sort of the dinosaurs that we see in sort of Ice Age 3, and they actually kind of kept the style in. The dinosaurs kind of looked somewhat similar. You think they would change it as years went on and their sort of animation went on, but you can tell that the fact of their animation style stayed the same. It was just but the graphics kind of improved, the technology improved to kind of more sort of put more vividness and more pizzazz into their actual animated styles to make it look better, more prettier. So you can tell there that evolution, the fact of their animated style stayed the same, it didn't change, but it always worked, and you could just tell this was just a staple of who they were as a studio and as a creative. And I think looking back on that and looking back of how they tell stories and the silliness of it, but also the kind-heartedness was just lovely. One of the things that I noticed as I was rewatching the film was a quote that Manny gives, Manfred, the mammoth. There's a quote that he gives early on in the film. Sid's running away from two rhinos, and because he basically sort of steps in poo, and then goes onto their salad, ruins their salad, eats their dandelion, which is probably covered in poo as well. But then again, it's Sid; he probably doesn't care. But anyway, he's getting chased by them. He finds Manny, and the rhinos are basically saying to him like, give us the sloth. We ain't going to eat him. We just kind of want to, kill him. Um, and Manny does a quote which to me sets up Manny's whole arc, not just in this movie, but I feel like it's the arc that follows the character all the way to the end, really. Um, and it's a simple quote, but when you know what you're looking for, it's quite heartfelt and quite sort of punching. But the quote goes, "You know, I don't like animals that kill for pleasure." Now, at first, when you hear that, like as a kid, I never noticed that at all. I never noticed the quote. I never sort of took any acknowledgement of it. It was just mammoth is going to take on rhinos. Awesome. You know what I mean? Um, then when you get to know Manny more, and Sid just hints about what about you and your family, and he ignores him. He turns his back on him. You could probably even go as far as imagine that you can't see his face because he's crying. You don't see it, but you can just imagine it from what you see. And what the scene's telling you. And then you get to the cave where I was telling you about the aliens and about sort of the evolution. Once they have the whole sort of funny slalom sort of part on the ice, trying to get the baby back, there's a moment where you see the cave paintings, and the cave paintings tell the story of how Manny was with his wife, and he'd mated for life, and he had a little child, and that humans had basically come, attacked his family, and killed his wife and his daughter. And it's a very heartfelt and it's a very beautiful sort of sad moment. Um, and to us, when I was watching it, it was so well done that I instantly I was like, I would love to see a movie done in cave painting form. Like it was all done on rock on as a cave painting. That's all you got. I'd love to see a movie done that way. Would you ever see one? I don't know. Maybe a short film, probably not a full length movie, but I would love to see a animated movie done in a 2D sort of cave painting form, because it was just beautiful how it was done, and that kind of adds to the emotion aspect of it, of how emotionally sort of scarring it is when you see it. Like, oh, like generally I was watching, I was like, why? What was with the late 90s, well, the late 90s, the whole of the 90s and the early 2000s, they all had to have a very sort of heartfelt moment. They all had to have moments where the villains die horrifically. Tarzan, Clayton, gets hung, and you actually see his body. Well, you don't see it, but you get like a silhouette of his body being hung by vines. Um, and the Little Mermaid, she ends up getting the one of the villains, Ursula, gets skewered like straight for the heart. What else? I could be here all day. Lion King, Scar gets ripped apart by her hyenas. I could go on all day, every day. All dogs go to heaven. Need I say more for that film? Littlefoot and his mother. Like, generally, I could go on and on and on and on and on. My question is, why? Like, why? Why did you have to mentally scar a whole entire generation, with such horrific deaths? I don't get it. Like, granted, fair enough, the bad guy in this movie, he is, like, wholeheartedly, there's no redemption. He's just an evil bloke, or an evil saber-tooth tiger even. But generally, like, we didn't have to kind of see, well, we didn't see it, but like have the interpretation that he was impaled multiple times by ice shingles, I think it's called. That, whenever you have ice and it kind of melts into a point, like those things falling off and just skewering him. Didn't really need to get it in a kids movie, because if you do pay attention to a lot of animated movies nowadays, you don't really get that in terms of villains. Most of the villains, they get arrested, or they leave, or they get into trouble. You don't really see them getting killed nowadays, which I understand why they changed it. But you could just tell how hardcore animated movies were back in the day. Like, yeah, these are made for kids, but fuck them. You know what I mean? Like, we're gonna show you, we're gonna break your heart, we're gonna make you cry, we're gonna scar you for life. But you're gonna be happy about it. You're gonna be pleased about it. Okay, it's gonna live with you for the rest of your life. So it was just one of them funny sort of things that I noticed. But going back to the Manny thing, it made me appreciate the character more and made me understand the story more. Because what you have to imagine and what you have to remember is that humans killed Manny's wife and his child brutally. In his eyes, it was done for pleasure. Obviously, humans, as we know, they did it because they were hunting and they did it for food. but through the eyes of him, through the eyes of an animal, having a look at this, not being able to understand the humans, not being able to understand why why the sort of the creatures are doing what they're doing, you're just going to see it as, well, they must have done it for sport, for pleasure. And that's when it kind of brings on the whole quote, was where he says, "I don't like animals that kill for pleasure," you know, and you have to sort of bring yourself back to the fact of when he finds the woman and she has the baby and she drowned in, she offers it to him and he hesitates at first and he takes the baby, but he takes the baby, but then he goes to leave it and Sid's like, well, no, you can't leave it. And you have to kind of remember, this is a hard moment for him. He's not just sworn off all other animals and he wants to be on his own for the rest of his life until he dies. But you have to remember, he's sworn off humans as well. Like, he hates them. He has a real, genuinely vendetta against humans, a reason to hate them. So to take a human, especially a baby human, knowing that there's a potentiality that that human could grow up and one day try to kill him, you know, is a very hard thing for him to do. And as the story goes on, you could tell there are moments where he doesn't want to care for the child, but he does. There are moments where the child hugs his trunk, and it gives him like a flashback, a reminder of like when his daughter or his son, his little child, did the same to him. You know, and then by the end of it, when they have the reunion, when he goes to give the baby back to its father, um, the father puts a spear up to him, and you can see in his eyes the fact of, like, no, don't need it. I'm done with this whole sort of pointing spears and this. Like, and he takes off him and he throws it away, and he just sort of, and the rest of them come and attack him and go to kill him, and he just shows the baby. He's like, look, I have your son. And to me, from watching from the beginning of the movie to the end, to when we first meet Manny and we get that quote, and then we see the scene with him and the baby, how they interact, and we get the cave painting sort of revelation of what happened to him and his family. The whole sort of character arc for this movie is so heartfelt. The fact of Manny goes from being, I want to be on my own, I've lost everything, to coming to terms with the fact of needing family, needing someone who cares for you, and um, sort of forgiving. Like, I don't know. Like, again, I'm maybe I'm going too deep into it. Maybe I'm going too deep in the story, um, but it just felt quite nice, to see this character, how it's Manny's evolved, how Manny's changed, how Manny's proven that he's better than man, he's better than humanity, that he's learned to forgive, and that he's moved on to the fact of, I will never forgive them for what they did, but I will give, like, I will spare your child and I will save your child's life, unlike you spared mine. Again, I am just sort of spitballing here. I'm making up from what the story told me, my interpretation of what I think the story, or what even should I could even go as far as what I think the writers were trying to say. You know, um, maybe that's what they were going for. Again, I don't know. I wasn't one of the writers, but I think it was just a really interesting arc, and it's an arc that follows the character all the way through. When he meets his new the female mammoth, which I'm blanking on her name, played by Queen Latifah. When he meets her, and then when they eventually have, when she gets pregnant and she's having the baby in the third one, and how that he's trying to get back to them, how he's basically trying to, not just that, but he's also trying to protect Sid. He's trying to protect Diego, and he doesn't want Diego to leave in the third one because they're a pack, they're a family. You know, um, Again, it's a wonderful arc, and it just follows on so nicely. One of the things that I wish they did, and I'll most likely mention this again in the second episode, and I'll mention this again when I talk about the third movie, and maybe even the fourth and fifth. One of the things that I wish that Blue Sky did in terms of Ice Age was that in one of their movies brings back the baby, brings back the humans. I know it was Ice Age and it was to do with sort of the animals instead, but I feel like it would have been nice to bring back sort of the baby now grown up, and to kind of meet Manny and just kind of remember him. Even if it was only a short scene, it didn't have to be part of the whole movie. Just a short scene where sort of the baby grew up and it remembered Sid, it remembered Diego, it remembered Manny, and just had a little moment of just sort of where they looked eye to eye and then sort of walked away. I thought that would be a really nice thing. Obviously, they never did it, but I think they missed a beat there. Even if they did it a small thing, like a small tiny little cameo or whatever you want to call it, in one of the films, I think that would have been a really really nice. But they never did. They never visit humans again. They never sort of bring humans up. It's kind of the fact that you just imagine that. Obviously, we know they didn't. But in this world, in this ice age, humans are either died out or they're like miles and miles away, surviving somewhere else. So you never get any mention of them. You never hear from them again. But yeah, I love this movie. I really, really do. And like I said, as an adult watching it again, I have a greater appreciation for it. I have a greater appreciation not just for the story, not just for the characters, but for the sort of the things I didn't notice. Like I said, the innuendos, the jokes, the like I never noticed. I never realized. Like I always assumed that the Diego and the other saber-toothed tigers just wanted to kill the baby just cause. Like it sounds quite sick and gruesome to say, but because he was like young and very sort of I don't know what I don't really want to say it, but very sort of a young sort of child, that it was like, oh, it's a baby, it's easy prey. That's what we'll go for. That's what I thought that they were sort of the whole point of those characters were. That's what made them the bad guys. But it turns out that the whole point, the whole reason they were going after the baby was a plot of revenge. Was that basically the humans had attacked their herd and had used the saber-tooth tigers that they killed, used their skin for clothes and for shelter. And that basically Soto, who was the leader of the pack, basically wanted to get revenge for the humans killing their herd by killing their baby. Which I feel like, in all fairness, why didn't they just sort of kill all the humans? Why just go for the one baby? But again, I think it comes down to the fact of it's easy prey, and it's kind of like, the idea of, well, what's going to hurt the most? You killed half of my family, so I'm going to kill something that means a lot to you, i.e. the child. It's kind of like a Mandalorian sort of situation, isn't it? But I never noticed that before. I never noticed that small bit of dialogue, that the whole reason they did it was to get revenge back on the humans. So, these small little things that you notice when you see these films, but I appreciate those things. I appreciate the work that went in it. And you can see sort of where they go from here in terms of story, in terms of visuals, in terms of how their films are structured, and having the humor and have the silliness. I like it. It's a really good film. So much member berries, so much nostalgia. And I just wish they were still around. And I know I'm probably going to say that again. I'm going to repeat myself multiple times as we keep doing this. As we look at each one of their films moving up to the very end. But they were just such a good studio. They just knew what they were doing, especially in the early days. They knew what they were doing. So it's a shame that they're no longer around. But yeah, so overall, my thoughts and feelings on Ice Age. I love it. Member berries, roast into glasses. I don't care what anybody says. Generally, pure enjoyment from start to finish. Really, really loved it. Really enjoyed it. And yeah, so that is it. That is all she wrote. I have nothing much more. Get my words out. I have nothing much more to say. So let's end it, shall we? Let's go to the end. To the end of the world. So you've heard my views, you've heard my feelings on Ice Age. What are your feelings? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did you grow up with it? Did you enjoy it? Is it a film that you watch multiple times growing up? Is it a film that you watched once, thought, meh, it was all right, let me all know. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your feelings. Because at the end of the day, this is just my opinion. But what matters the most is what you think. What's your opinion? Did you like it? Didn't you like it? Do you like this series? Do you like what I'm doing? Anything like that, any sort of question, query, or you just want to tell me something, you can let me know on my Twitter at Nerdstalgic_pod. Just contact me there, and we can have a chin wag on not just this, on anything nerdy and anything sort of nostalgic. So let me know on there. You can also find this podcast on Spotify. You can find it on Anchor. You can find it on Google Podcasts. You can find it on Amazon Music Podcasts. Also, I'm on YouTube at Nerdstalgic. At the Nerdstalgic podcast. Just look for my flaming face, and you'll find me there. For any sort of back catalogue episodes, if you can't listen to the show on Spotify, it's completely free on YouTube. So you can watch older episodes on there. Currently, I upload 2 to 3 episodes every week. So I'm slowly catching up with myself. And then soon, all my new episodes will be going on there, either the day of or the day after. But if you get onto YouTube and you can't access any other podcasting sites, then by all means, subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to like and share and let everybody know that I'm there, because it just makes the show more accessible. I had loads of people say to me that they want to listen to the show, but they don't have Spotify and they don't have Anchor, or they don't have access to any of us thing, or they just don't want to make an account, which in all fairness, in nowadays, I don't blame people. So I just decided that I wanted to make the show a lot more accessible. So within doing so, I made a YouTube. That way it's free. You don't need to have an account to use it. You can just go on there and you can listen to any other episode that you want. Obviously, if you do have an account, please do subscribe. It helps out immensely. It helps out so much. Also, if you listen to this show on Spotify, don't forget to give me a rating. So underneath my on my page on Spotify, underneath my picture, there'll be a little star rating. If you click on that, then it'll give you the option to rate from 5 stars to 1 star. 5 stars being the best thing you ever heard in your life. 1 star basically being Vogons doing poetry, absolutely terrible, one of the worst things you ever heard in your life. So whatever you feel like is fair, 5 to 1 star, please just let me know. Because what it does, it just helps out immensely, because the higher my star rating, basically, the more people that will get to see the show on Spotify. That's just how it works, really. So we will have. So if you would be so kind, give me a rating. But you don't have to. It's up to you. But that is that. That's all the business. Oh, one more thing. I just want to, again, before we wrap up, again, I just want to say thank you, and also remind you folks that the wonderful people at World of Books, thank you for sponsoring this episode. Thanks for sponsoring the show. Don't forget your 10% off code. That's nerdy10. That's NERDY 10. All higher case. Put that in at the cash point and save yourself £10% off any of your purchases from now to the end of the year. So yeah, that is everything. That is all she wrote. Thank you, as always, for listening to my show. I know there are many other podcasts. I know there are many other podcasts out there, and you could listen to any one of them. You don't have to listen to mine. But if you listen to this, then you listened all the way through, and I greatly appreciate it. It means so much. Obviously, don't forget to share with friends and let anybody know about what I'm doing here, because it really, really it means a lot to kind of get the word out there. I've only been doing this so far for this year, so only a few months, but the show is growing immensely quickly, and it means so much to me. And it's just down to you wonderful people who listen to all the episodes, or if you listen to this the first time, even you matter. You mean a lot to me, and I appreciate you so much. Even if this is the only episode you ever listen to, I am so grateful. So thank you to you. Thank you to everybody who listens every week. And yeah, so that is everything. So thank you for listening. It means so much to me. It really, really does. I am now losing my voice. I'm going to go have to take a drink of water. Luckily, I did this on a very cold day, because if I did this over like Monday, Tuesday, I would have been fried. So I'm going to love and leave you all. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast. Much appreciated. Love you all. Cheerio.